Aloha, welcome to Hope Chat from Makiki. I'm Pastor Corey, and in this video we'll be talking about core values, seeking balance. Let me begin with you by reading Romans 5 verses 3, 4, and 5. It says, "We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us." We talked last time about how each of us appears to have been made to resemble two facets of God's emotion by having been given both a primary and secondary core value, or as Bethy's put it, a dominant major and a dominant minor. This time we'll consider how our core values affect whether our decision-making processes begin with our intellect or our emotion, and whether or not we're satisfied with being in the knowing or in touch with our feelings. And if our core values drive us towards action first, with or without intellectual or emotional clarity. These tendencies, without being balanced, make it difficult for us to love as we were intended, and results in what the Apostle Paul summarizes, not being able to do the good we intend and doing the bad we've not intended. When Paul says in that same Romans 7 passage that sin is with me, he is speaking of how his brokenness, expressed as pride, selfishness, and rebellion, would prevent him, and you and I too, from ever living in love, humility, and unity, except for the grace of God revealed to us through Jesus Christ. So let's talk about this grace of God and what this means to you and I in practical terms first. First, to describe this grace of God towards us because of the work of Jesus Christ and our faith in that work of Jesus Christ as peace and connection with God through Son and Spirit, as Paul describes it in Romans 5, 1 through 5, seems very appropriate. We've been given peace with God by faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, we're no longer God's enemies because of our past words and deeds said and done out of sinful pride, selfishness, or rebellion. But we've not only had Christ's righteousness attributed to us, we've been made God's sons and daughters. Accordingly, just as we can observe in the life of Jesus Christ in the gospel accounts, we too receive hope and help through God, the Holy Spirit. But how does this general revelation of God's grace towards us apply to each of our own lives? That's where the lessons we learned in pure love regarding initiation, agreement, and empowerment begin to be practical. Initiation, agreement, and empowerment in light of our core values will first be explained here using the two core values on the right side of the diagram corresponding with what's been termed right brain behavior, the relators, the exhorters. For these who are naturally more in touch with their emotions and God's feelings too, they find themselves in agreement with God's initiation as they arrive at a sense of passion or conviction. This agreement in their souls sets the stage for the Holy Spirit to empower them to act out that emotive impulse. For the so-called left-brainers, we call them observers and captains, the process begins not with a feeling, but with a thought shared with God. Their movement from initiation to agreement, however, because it's intellectual and not emotional, goes through a process which leads to the formulation of a belief and or a choice or possible choices. The Holy Spirit here helps the observer or captain to put a choice or choices into action. This can seem complicated as you begin to recognize that people have both a dominant major and a dominant minor value. But if you will take time to look at the chart provided with today's diagram, you begin to see how the respective values of being and doing, thinking and feeling work together and become increasingly clear in the lives of those who've become believers, followers, and servants of God. In any case, in my next video, I'll speak in greater detail about how this process works in the captain observer and in the relator exhorter. Spiritual maturity and health is gained as we learn to consistently find God's balance, both in grace and in relationship with other believers, in this process of initiation, agreement, and empowerment, according to God's love, humility, and unity, and not our former pride, selfishness, and rebellion. Well, in conclusion, while we each have the potential to be a lover or a dictator, as we learn to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we find grace to grow in our love for God, for our neighbors, and for ourselves. Try to watch this video a couple more times. Do it on your own, and then discuss these questions with someone who's watched the video with you and with whom you've developed a measure of trust and relationship. Here's 3 questions to think about. First, what seems to be your dominant major and dominant minor core values? Perhaps you might share your thoughts with one another and compare what you think you see in each other. Secondly, if you write about your core values, how can you grow in love and balance? Thirdly, when you recognize your own need or needs, ask one another for help in prayer. Should you not have recognized your own core values yet, or if you don't recognize your own needs, ask for prayer for wisdom, discernment, faith, hope, and love. Until next time, aloha.